Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Yesterday, or really it was last night, I haven't slept since. I don't know if you can see how red my eyes. I've had some eye drops and that's helped. But anyway, I haven't slept since the last video that was uploaded on the channel. And that video informed you guys about the situation with the GTX 1650. I basically spoke about how Nvidia withheld the press driver so that no one could provide a day one review when these things went on sale. Very odd choice by Nvidia there, and I did speculate as to why they may have done this. Based on the official specs, it seemed likely that Nvidia was trying to avoid any bad press, or at least reduce the volume of reviews hitting the net at the same time, especially when these things went on sale. I also speculated that GTX 1650 was going to be around 10% slower on average than the Radeon RX 570, and this makes it a rather pointless product. Dead on arrival, if you will. Anyway, I grabbed the driver as soon as it was available to the public and I got testing. Due to time and how long I can fight off needing to sleep for, just a dozen games have been tested, but I think this gives us a really good picture of where the 1650 stands. I'm not going to go over specs or any of that stuff again, it's all in the previous videos for those of you who are interested. For testing, I'm using the MSI GTX 1650 Gaming X, which uses an external 6-pin PCIe power connector, but I also have the Gigabyte GTX 1650 Gaming OC on hand, and in terms of FPS performance, they are identical. I will compare the power consumption and operating temperatures of these two models towards the end of the review. Finally, for testing, I'll be looking closely at performance at 1080p in exactly a dozen titles, and the system used includes a Core i9 1900K clocked at 5GHz with 32GB of DDR4 3200 memory. Okay, let's get into the results. Kickstarting the benchmarks, we have a brand new title, World War Z, and this game supports the Vulkan API. Though performance for Nvidia GPUs isn't great with the current driver, so I've tested the GeForce GPUs using DirectX 11, and then the AMD GPUs using the low-level Vulkan API. Doing so saw the Radeon RX 570 absolutely smoke the GTX 1650 by a whopping 38% margin. Meanwhile, the 1650 was just 26% faster than the 1050 Ti, but also 15% slower than the 3GB 1060. Performance in Apex Legends, at least the quiet section of the game that I test, was very competitive between the GTX 1650 and RX 570. The Radeon GPU was still faster, but this time by a 4% margin, and generally anything less than 5% we deem a draw. The Division 2 has been a strong title for AMD, and that continues with the RX 570 in this GTX 1650 battle. Here the Radeon GPU offered 27% more performance at 1080p, making it the vastly superior GPU. Nvidia promised good things in new complex titles such as Shadow of the Tomb Raider, but here we see that the GTX 1650 simply isn't delivering. Performance was similar to that of the RX 570, but for a new GPU, similar performance really isn't good enough. The 1650 should be comfortably beating the 570 at this price point. The 1650 takes a serious beating in Forza Horizon 4. Here it was 21% slower than the RX 570. The performance difference was also quite noticeable in-game as the 570 never dipped below 60 FPS, allowing for a smoother gaming experience. On average, the RX 570 was 11% faster than the 1650 when testing with Just Cause 4. Typically, this is a good title for Nvidia, but even here the budget Turing GPU just can't get it done. Resident Evil 2 is another new title that works really well on AMD hardware, and here the RX 570 was 30% faster than the GTX 1650. Here we see that while the Radeon GPU was able to maintain over 60 FPS at all times, the 1650 dropped down to 50 FPS. One game that you can always depend on to boost GeForce performance is Fortnite, and here the GTX 1650 is able to just edge out the RX 570, though overall I'd call this one a tie. The 1650 was also 26% faster than the 1050 Ti. Metro Exodus is an Nvidia sponsored title, so you'd expect the GTX 1650 to get the win here, but it doesn't. Basically it matched the RX 570, but that was the best it could do. Rainbow Six Siege throws us a curveball, though given what we've seen from the Turing GPU so far in this title, we were pretty well ready for it. Here the GTX 1650 is able to beat the RX 570, and by a convincing margin as well. Shame we didn't see more of this. Here we see similar frame rates in Battlefield 5. Here the RX 570 was slightly faster on average, while both provided a similar 1% low result. This meant the 1650 was 26% faster than the GTX 1050 Ti and 11% slower than the 3GB 1060. The GTX 1650 doesn't really impress in Far Cry New Dawn. Here it was just 23% faster than the GTX 1050 Ti, which meant it was 18% slower than the RX 570. In fact, at 1080p using the ultra quality preset, it struggled to average 60 FPS, whereas the 570 maintained over 60 FPS at all times. Moving on to power consumption, here the GTX 1650 is reasonably impressive. The Gigabyte model pushes total system consumption to 184 watts, whereas the MSI model hit 192 watts. When compared to the GTX 1050 Ti, this is only around a 10% increase in total system draw for what looked to be an over 30% improvement in performance, and we'll look at that in a moment. Meanwhile, the RX 570 pushed total system consumption 55% higher, and while faster overall, it wasn't anywhere near 55% faster. So the 1650 is certainly the more efficient product, but I'm still not convinced it's better overall. Now, before we move on to the performance summary, here is a quick look at operating temperatures and clock speeds. The MSI Gaming X peaked at 61 degrees in a 21 degree room, and this saw it typically operating at a boost frequency of 1920 MHz. So needless to say, it was very cool and quiet. The larger Gigabyte model though, the Gaming OC, that was able to best the result of the MSI card, peaking at just 58 degrees, and this allowed it to average 1950 MHz for the boost clock. In terms of frame rate performance though, this didn't really have a significant impact. As I said, they were basically identical, one frame here and there, but still running slightly cooler with a bump in frequency is a win for Gigabyte here. Okay, so at this point your socks should be firmly in place. The GeForce GTX 1650 has been pretty underwhelming so far, but to get a clearer picture of just how underwhelming the 1650 is, let's look at a few head-to-head comparisons. For some reason, Nvidia keeps comparing the GTX 1650 to the GTX 1050, but the 1650 is $10 more than the launch price of the 1050 Ti, so it's by no means a replacement for the $110 GTX 1050. When compared to the 1050 Ti, the 1650 is just 35% faster on average, and remember the MSRP has been increased by 7%. In any case, after 3 years, a 35% boost at this price point is very underwhelming. Then when compared to the 3GB GTX 1060, the 1650 was found to be 9% slower on average. Granted, the 1060 came in at $200 US, but again, it's now a 3-year-old product. The 1650 only offered very small performance gains in a few select titles, and best case, it wasn't even 5% faster than the outgoing Pascal GPU. Now, when compared to the GTX 1660, the 1650 was 32% slower, which seems pretty good given it's 32% cheaper. That works out rather well, at least in a GTX Turing bubble it does. But as you're about to see in this price range, there's quite a bit of competition, and serious competition at that. Here we have the Radeon RX 570, which is a $170 US part, or at least it was once upon a time. For many, many months now, it's been selling for as little as $130 US, and currently there are multiple options available at that price. This makes the GTX 1650 around 15% more expensive, and yet we found it to be 10% slower on average, and up to 20% slower in multiple titles. So then, the GTX 1650 is indeed dead on arrival. And if you need further proof of that, then here we have the cost per frame graph. 2 years after the release of the RX 570, we're getting a GPU that's 31% more costly per frame. That's really bad, and even if we ignore the insanely good RX 570s, the RX 580 is still better value, offering way more performance for a small price premium. Again, we can see that the 1650 offers a similar level of value to that of the 1660, but at under $200, where Nvidia faces much stiffer competition, it just doesn't cut it. Well, that went pretty much as expected based on the specs that we discussed in yesterday's video, or last night's video, whenever the hell that video happened. I felt like the 1650 was going to be around 10% slower than the RX 570, at 10% slower on average, and as luck would have it, that was the exact margin that we found, at least based on our testing from the 12 game sample. At the current $150 US MSRP, the GTX 1650 is a pointless product and it can't compete with 2 to 3 year old GPUs from the competition. At $110 US, the 1650 would have been competitive and not particularly exciting, but at least competitive. For it to be a really compelling option, Nvidia would need to charge $100 US, so we need a 33% price cut to really recommend this thing. I know some will argue that the GTX 1650 is great because it doesn't need an external power connector, but in my opinion, you're kind of clutching at straws on that one. You can upgrade your power supply if need be for around $35 US to a decent 450 to 500 watt model, and that'll certainly get you out of trouble. Then for those that can't upgrade their power supply in order to upgrade their GPU, well, I think it's fair to say that is a super niche category of gamer. Moreover, I've noticed that the GTX 1650s that lack an external PCIe power input, so models that don't have this little guy here, but both the models I have do, but yeah, I've noticed the models that don't have that connector, they're clocked much lower because, well, they're limited to 75 watts. They draw all their power from the PCI Express connector, PCI Express times 16 connector there. So yeah, these ones aren't limited to that, so they can clock a bit higher. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much slower the cards without the connector are. And I suspect the upgrade over the GTX 1650 Ti will be, less impressive. Obviously it'll be less impressive, but I think it'll be less impressive to the degree where, I suppose it just makes this even more pointless, doesn't it? Anyway, that's some extra testing that I'll have to do. I've taken some of our Patreon money and I've ordered a few base model 1650s. So yeah, I'll follow up shortly with that content after I get asleep. And yeah, we'll see how they go. But I don't expect that to, I don't expect it to put the 1650s in a better position because, as I said, the 75 watt limited models will be noticeably slower. And anyway, I think just ending this video, this miserable release for me, this product's pointless. I think it's fair to say it was dead on arrival. You can pretty much ignore it. That's a really big shame because I really liked the RTX 2060, I liked the GTX 1660 Ti, and I liked the vanilla 1660. They all really appealed to me, and so it's a bit of a shame to see that good run of nice value, reasonably exciting products come to a serious end, a sharp halt with the 1650, and it appears like the RX 570 will live on. So bit of a never die graphics card, that one. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, sorry if it was a bit all over the place, a bit slow paced, I was a bit off my game, but if you did like it, please hit the like button. And if you appreciate me staying up for a very long time to get all the testing done and wait for Nvidia to release the drivers and all that nonsense, then I suppose you can leave a like. You can subscribe for more content where I'm much more awake. You can support us on Patreon, so that allows us to buy graphics cards such as the ones without the 6-pin connector, because I imagine the companies we work with won't be too keen to send us any more of these cards, and they usually aren't too keen to send base models anyway. Haven't been able to get my hands on any of the base model 1660s, 1660 Ti's or RTX 2060s, but we'll be buying those. And it's our awesome Patreon members that allow us to do that. And we do have a really cool Patreon community as well, and I keep you guys in the loop of what's going on behind the scenes and all that sort of stuff over on our Discord chat. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.